When discussing modern naval power, much of the attention naturally falls on aircraft carriers. These vessels form the centerpiece of many nations' maritime strategy. China, over the past 2 decades, has invested heavily in building a blue water navy capable of projecting power far beyond its immediate coastline. At the core of this capability is the Chinese Carrier Strike Group. Like the US Carrier Strike Group, the version created by China is a complex, integrated formation of warships, submarines, aircraft, and logistics vessels. However, while there are certainly similarities, there are key differences between the carrier strike groups of the two nations. China's carrier group is also an evolving organism. It's currently based around smaller carriers without catapults. But this will change once the PLA Navy obtains more of the catapult-equipped cattle-bar carriers, like the Fujian, and brings them up to initial operating capability. Currently, China operates the Type 001 Liaoning and the Type 002 Shandong, both stow-bar carriers equipped with ski jump ramps. Stow-bar stands for short takeoff but arrested recovery. The primary carrier air wing for these vessels is centered on the J-15 fighter, a multi-role aircraft derived from the Russian Su-33 flanker. Each carrier typically embarks roughly 24 to 36 J-15s, with the exact number varying by the number of helicopters also carried on board. Complementing the J-15 are the early warning variants of the Z-18 helicopter, the Z-18J, which provide airborne surveillance extending the radar horizon beyond what the carrier's own sensors can detect. While combat aircraft provide potent offensive power, Chinese carrier groups differ from their US counterparts in one key respect, which is greater reliance on surface warships, particularly destroyers, for offensive power. The Type 055 large destroyers, sometimes described as a cruiser, carry a substantial array of long-range anti-ship missiles. Each vessel is equipped with a universal vertical launch system of 112 cells, capable of deploying long-range HHQ-9B surface-to-air missiles, the YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missiles, and potentially the YJ-20 anti-ship ballistic missiles, previously misidentified as the YJ-21. These destroyers act as both the shield and the spear for the carrier group. In the event of conflict, they can strike adversary ships hundreds of kilometers away, while simultaneously providing a dense, layered air defense umbrella for the carrier itself. The YJ-20 anti-ship ballistic missile is likely crucial for a Chinese carrier strike group's offensive reach. According to the PLA, and do take this with a grain of salt, the YJ-20's terminal speed may reach Mach 10. Combined with a mid-course maneuverable trajectory, the YJ-20 may be able to strike heavily defended targets, such as aircraft carriers, with minimal warning and very little reaction time for enemy defenses. Its range, likely between 700 and 1,500 kilometers, allows Chinese carrier groups to threaten high-value targets far beyond the first island chain, while remaining well within the protective umbrella of mainland-based air defenses and missile systems. Unlike conventional cruise missiles or carrier aircraft, which are limited by flight time and interception risk, the YJ-20 provides a more flexible and potentially more dangerous strike capability that supplements the carrier air wing and the more numerous YJ-18 anti-ship cruise missiles, and the less powerful YJ-83 subsonic missiles, giving the PLAN a credible offensive threat against advanced naval formations. the greater emphasis that the PLA Navy places on its large surface combatants as offensive instruments within the carrier force is very different from the US carrier strike groups. In the US Navy, the surface warships in a carrier strike group, such as the Arleigh Burke destroyers, primarily serve defensive roles, protecting the aircraft carrier from air and submarine threats. Offensive punch is generally focused on land attack capability. In naval warfare, the offensive arm of the US carrier group is the aircraft carrier and its carrier air wing, the Super Hornet and the F-35C, while basically all the other ships are there to support and to defend the aircraft carrier. In the Chinese model, vessels like the Type 055 destroyers carry large quantities of long-range anti-ship missiles, enabling them to project power independently of the carrier air wing. This doctrinal difference is driven in part by the limitations of China's current ski jump carriers, which can constrain the payload and range of carrier-based fighters like the J-15, at least given suboptimal conditions. As a result, Chinese carrier aircraft are often better suited for air superiority missions rather than strike missions that require heavier missiles, leaving the heavier surface combatants to carry the bulk of offensive firepower against enemy surface warships. By integrating modern destroyers armed with highly capable anti-ship missiles, the PLAN can hold distant adversaries at risk while keeping its relatively smaller and less experienced carrier air wings in a more defensive posture. Chinese carrier strike groups are generally believed to operate alongside nuclear submarines, such as the Type 093B and 093A, which provide an additional layer of undersea capability. However, while rapidly improving, these submarines remain less stealthy than modern American counterparts, such as the Seawolf class and the more advanced variants of the Virginia class. China's diesel-electric submarines, though very quiet and stealthy, are too slow to operate alongside a fast-moving carrier strike group. The faster, nuclear-powered submarines, while able to keep pace, still face significant disadvantage when confronting the quieter US submarines. As a result, Chinese carrier groups rely heavily on other assets for anti-submarine warfare, including surface warships equipped with a multitude of different sonars, and long-range anti-submarine missiles, as well as the helicopters these ships carry. This reliance on surface warships for anti-submarine warfare reflects the broader strategic context. Unlike the US Navy, which emphasizes a network of highly stealthy nuclear attack submarines to fend off enemy submarines, the PLAN mitigates the relative vulnerability of its submarine force by prioritizing surface combatants and their organic aviation assets to detect, deter, and to destroy submarine threats in carrier strike group operations. Within the PLAN carrier group, the Type 055 and the Type 052D destroyers, together with Type 054A frigates, form an integrated anti-submarine screen. They are equipped with hull-mounted sonar, variable depth sonars, and towed array sonar systems. Anti-submarine warfare is further extended through the use of shipborne helicopters. The Z-20 or Z-18F naval helicopters operating from the carrier or the destroyers can deploy sonobuoys, dipping sonar, and torpedoes to hunt enemy submarines. The warships themselves have the U-8 anti-submarine missile, allowing them to fight underwater threats at long ranges. By combining ship sensors and helicopter assets, the PLAN aims to create a protective umbrella around its high-value unit, offsetting the relative limitations of its nuclear submarine fleet in open ocean anti-submarine warfare. The rationale is basically pragmatic. Chinese nuclear submarines, although increasingly capable, are still noisier and less stealthy than their US counterparts, making them less suited for going after American submarines. Replenishment and logistics form another pillar of the Chinese carrier group's operational concept. High-end naval power projection is impossible without sustained resupply. Warships carry only a finite amount of fuel, munitions, and provisions. For example, a Type 055 destroyer has an operational range of roughly 9,300 kilometers, which allows for transoceanic transit, but not indefinite presence on distant patrol. To maintain a persistent forward presence, the Chinese Navy has developed fast combat support ships, namely the Type 901 class. The Type 901, with a displacement of 45,000 tons, is a purpose-built fast supply ship capable of accompanying a carrier strike group at speeds of up to 25 knots. This speed ensures it can keep pace with the carrier and its escort during high-speed transit or operational maneuvers, something the earlier Type 903A supply ships, limited to just 20 knots, could not reliably achieve. The Type 901 carries fuel, fresh water, ammunition, and other supplies, and is designed for multi-station underway replenishment. Multiple refueling hoses allow simultaneous transfer of liquid fuel to the carrier and escort, while solid goods can be delivered via transfer stations or vertical replenishment using Z-8 helicopters. This capability transforms the Type 901 into a floating logistics hub, enabling the carrier group to operate for extended periods without returning to port. Although lightly armed with 4 30mm autocannons for self-defense, the Type 901 is not intended for front-line combat. It operates at the center of the formation, shielded by the carrier and its escorting warships. In this sense, the Type 901 plays a role similar to the US Navy's supply class fast combat support ships, ensuring that the operational reach of the carrier strike group extends far beyond fuel or ammunition constraints of the combat vessels. Chinese carrier strike groups, and indeed the Chinese Navy, do not operate in isolation. They are deeply integrated with other elements of the PLA, including the PLA Air Force and land-based assets. Land-based aircraft, particularly the H-6 bombers, provide long-range strike options, while shore-based anti-ship ballistic missiles, such as the DF-21D, can engage high-value targets at ranges that surpass the organic reach of the carrier group. By positioning carrier groups relatively close to the Chinese mainland, the PLAN can leverage these land-based missiles and land-based aircraft to extend offensive coverage, potentially allowing Chinese carrier groups to stand their ground against US carrier groups, despite having smaller and weaker carriers, at least for the time being. This contrasts with US carrier strike groups, which generally operate at greater distances from their home bases, relying primarily on the carrier air wing and long-range Tomahawk missiles for strike operations, supplemented by intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance from satellites or other fleet units. The interplay between aircraft, surface warships, helicopters, and logistics vessels reflects a deliberate doctrinal choice. In the Chinese model, the aircraft carrier is not a solitary instrument of naval power. It is the centerpiece of a layered and integrated system designed to provide offensive punch and defensive resilience through many different channels. Understanding the Chinese carrier strike group requires looking beyond the carrier alone. The Type 055 destroyers with their potent missiles are quintessential offensive tool, while the Type 052D and Type 054A escorts provide protection for the carrier, including layered anti-air and anti-submarine capabilities. Helicopters enhance situational awareness and provide tactical flexibility, particularly in anti-submarine operations. And the Type 901 ensures that the entire formation can remain at sea for weeks or even months, maintaining forward presence in critical regions. The integration with land-based aircraft and missile systems allows the PLAN to leverage geographic advantage, deploying carrier groups in relatively close proximity to the Chinese mainland, and maintaining access to long-range strike assets based on land. In contrast, in the US carrier group, the aircraft carrier provides the main offensive punch, especially in naval warfare, not the surface combatant. The cruisers and destroyers are only there to defend the aircraft carrier. The US Navy also relies more on nuclear submarines for anti-submarine warfare, although, like their Chinese counterparts, they still make extensive use of helicopters in anti-submarine warfare as well. Unlike their Chinese counterparts, the US carrier groups are more used to operate at longer distances from home bases and without the support of land-based aircraft and missile systems. Both the US and Chinese approaches to operating carrier groups reflect their respective strategic and geographic contexts, and the technological strengths and limitations of each navy. However, the Chinese carrier is not a static organism. It is evolving continuously and rapidly. With the Type 003 Fujian carrier, China is shifting towards a more US-like air-wing composition. The Fujian is a cattle-bar carrier equipped with catapults, which will support the launch of heavier aircraft and the launch of current aircraft with a full payload of fuel and munitions more consistently. The Fujian's air wing includes not only the J-15, but also the 5th generation J-35 stealth fighters, along with the KJ-600 early warning aircraft, an analog to the US E-2D Hawkeye. The fixed-wing KJ-600 represents a huge upgrade over the Z-18J helicopter. Compared to a helicopter, a fixed-wing early warning and control aircraft will have higher operating altitude, longer endurance, and carry a larger and presumably more powerful radar. Unlike the Z-18J, which is limited by helicopter speed, fuel capacity, and lighter radars, the fixed-wing KJ-600 can patrol at greater distances from the carrier, detect threats much earlier, and provide continuous real-time tracking of both air and surface targets. The greater power generation on the KJ-600 should allow it to carry more sophisticated computer and communication systems, making it far more effective for sharing information across the carrier strike group compared to a helicopter. The Fujian's expanded and more diversified air wing will allow Chinese carrier groups to perform a more balanced set of missions, with greater situational awareness and reach. Ultimately, the Chinese carrier strike group represents a pragmatic approach to building blue water naval power. It balances combat aircraft, missile firepower, anti-submarine capabilities and logistics support in a manner suited to China's strategic objectives and geographic realities. As China continues to build better carriers, better carrier fighters, surface combatants, and logistics vessels, its ability for power projection at sea will continue to evolve and grow over time. One fact should remain constant, which is that the carrier strike group should remain a key component of Chinese naval power.